How are you? It's so good to be with you tonight. My name is Cisco Walker. I'm an evangelist here in the Albuquerque area, predominantly within the International District. And tonight we're going to be talking about how the poor will always be with us. And I've chosen a particular portion of scripture tonight. I'm going to be reading just for a few moments out of Mark chapter 14 and verse 3. And the Bible says this, "And being in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came having an alabaster flask of very costly oil of spikenard. Then she broke the flask and poured it on his head. But there were some who were indignant among themselves and said, 'Why was this fragrant oil wasted? For it might have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor.' And they criticized her sharply. But Jesus said, 'Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me.'" Here's the key. For you have the poor with you always, and whenever you wish, you may do them good. But me you do not have always." Tonight we'll also be speaking with Ellen, and Ellen is an assistant district attorney, and we're going to be talking about the poor. We're going to be talking about criminalization of the homeless, and what can we do? Because as we look around our city, we see that something has to happen, because we see that there are so many people who are struggling with drug addiction, struggling with homelessness. And I know that in other states these things have been a problem for years and years. But how have you seen the city of Albuquerque change, looking, and when you drive through it and when you look around? What do you see, Ellen?
I've been in Albuquerque, I guess, for the last 13 or 14 years now. And we moved out to the country just a few years ago, actually, in part because of the crime in the city. And homelessness has just exploded in the last few years, it seems. And I really think a big part of it is fentanyl.
Yeah, the fentanyl epidemic, sure.
After the borders were opened, fentanyl just started pouring into the state. And I can tell you, in the last 2 years, everybody who gets arrested has fentanyl on them. Unless it's domestic violence or a DWI, pretty much everybody who gets arrested ends up also having fentanyl pills in their pocket. And at a certain amount, they end up getting charged with, potential for distribution because they have so many drugs on them.
Yeah, right.
And this stuff is so cheap. I'm hearing people getting, a dozen pills for $100. It's so dangerous.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it too.
And one of the things that I see a lot that just breaks my heart is people end up getting arrested. They go into custody for a few days. Their tolerance starts dropping. They get out, they OD, and they die.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've probably had half a dozen different defendants do that over the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
That have either gotten a hold of some in jail but aren't regular users, because they're usually methamphetamine users. And so they'll smoke up some fentanyl and they end up ODing. Or they're out of jail, they've had a few day break or a couple week break, something like this. They couldn't get a hold of what they needed in jail. They get out and they overdose.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we always have to remember, and it's difficult as evangelicals, as just people that are made in the image of God, people that are made in the similitude of God, is that when we see people who are on the side of the road, when we see people that are homeless, when we see people that are in our neighborhoods, we always have to remember that those are people. They're not just people that are on fentanyl. They're not just people that have a record. They're not just people that are just waiting for a court date. And I think that it takes the lens of the Spirit to remind us and to quicken us to really concentrate and see people as people, not just problems that are within our community or problems that are just within the legal system. So have you found it difficult to do those lines get blurred at times? Where is it hard to see people in the kind of work that you do with because you have so many of the different dynamics. You have the fentanyl, you have the homelessness, you have violent offenders, you have all kinds of what some would call darkness that are surrounding these people, and it's easy just to focus on the negativity, right?
It is, and it's really easy to get cynical.
Okay, great, yeah.
Because you see the worst in people, the absolute worst every day. And all of the dark things that people don't want to believe are really happening, like children being molested.
Yeah.
Oh, they're happening. And it's hard to convince a jury of that, even when you have evidence for them, because people really don't want to believe that there are monsters, that there are monsters here in our community. But there are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's terrible.
But when it comes to drug addicts, it's not hard at all for me to see them as people. Partly because that is still somebody's son or daughter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, and they weren't born a drug addict. They were probably really cute, you know? And the vast majority of drug addicts that I've interacted with at all have so much pain.
Yeah.
And
that's good. Yeah.
Part of the reason why they're drug addicts is because of the pain.
And then there's that cycle. You've probably seen this. You're probably extremely familiar with this. But a person could wind up being on the streets of Albuquerque. They don't have a drug problem, but now they're on the streets of Albuquerque. They're suffering with pain. They're suffering with emptiness. They're suffering with low self-esteem. They feel like they've lost everything. Many of these individuals, they have literally lost everything. And so why not turn to fentanyl? Why not turn to alcohol? Why not do something or take something to kill the pain?
Just for a little while.
Yeah, just to make it stop.
Just to take a break.
Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you, and this is a true story, my husband was homeless. And during that time, he had been in a terrible accident and died. He was resuscitated multiple times on the interstate on I-25 near San Mateo. He had 10 broken bones throughout his body. 5 of them were in his spine. He lost his job, lost his housing because he couldn't pay his bills because he couldn't move for months. And so he ended up with nothing. He ended up on the street. He put what he had left in storage and later lost that. And while he was on the street, he ended up in a shelter for a while. And he saw a lot while he was there. And then once he was able to start working, he started making a little money, but now he's making money, he can't stay in the shelter. So now he's sleeping in his car. Because he's not going to make enough money to put down a down payment and a deposit on an apartment or something like that on his first couple paychecks, right?
Yeah.
You have to save up for that kind of thing. And so now he's sleeping in his car, and then some drug addicts rob him in the middle of the night. Guns to his head. He lost what he had left. They took everything.
Yeah.
And he turned to drugs.
And these situations, like you're talking about your husband. These are things that are like far more common than people even realize. Like it's happening now. There's probably a lot of people that are dealing with things like that now that are very similar to that. So it's just kind of like, well, what do we do, and how can we fix it? I wanted to ask you if you had noticed this. There seems to be like a trend on YouTube with people like filming the war zone and like the international district. There's a lot of videos on that, and I have a YouTube channel, and I have done interviews. I haven't done very many of them. If you go to my channel, you'll be able to see the interviews that I've done. But I felt like the Lord convicted me to stop doing these interviews, because I just kind of felt like I was seeing I was seeing individuals who were hurting. I was seeing individuals who were in desperation, and I began to. I don't really know if it was doing them any good, you know?
Okay.
And so, like, I stopped, and I haven't done any more, and I don't plan to do any more at all. But I've been looking and at some things lately, and I see a lot of these videos that are on the internet. And, you know, obviously nobody knows the heart of these individuals, but filming people who are suffering and who are dying, who are being exploited, and who are wandering aimlessly in hell. It's distasteful. You know, I think it's, you know, I really don't think it's right, because I see a lot of people, they're doing it for the likes. They're doing it for the shock value, and I've seen that begin to crop up. And I'm reminded in Proverbs 17 and verse 5, it says, "He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. He who is glad at calamity, like, will not go unpunished." And so I just wonder, have you seen any of this, of people that are filming? You know, they're filming in like Kensington, and they're filming in some of these other states here in the United States, and it's become like kind of popular, where people, like, they kind of, it seems like there's almost like a market for this kind of thing. And I just think that I think it's something that people that have YouTube channels, people that are doing work, you know, it's like, if you're going to do a work in the international district, if you're going to do the corporal works of mercy, right? If you're going to hand out bottles of water, if you're going to clothe the naked, if you're going to try to shelter those that have no shelter, if you're going to visit those in prison under the guise of Christianity, then, like, don't film it, because we're not in this to just, you know, get likes and just to be popular on our channels. And
Well, and that's very contrary to what Jesus would have said too.
yeah, okay, so elaborate on that. What
Jesus talked about giving alms and making a show of it,
okay, yeah, exactly.
and he didn't approve.
Yeah, that's good.
But you know, when I think about videos of homelessness, what immediately comes to my mind is San Francisco.
Okay, yeah.
Just because there's been so much, things have gone so badly there that it's making news. And I think people want to know what's going on, but I also think there's some level of sensationalization. You know, people slow down to see what happens at the car wreck or whatever. And I don't know, I don't know what level that's instinctual, sort of a fear response, something bad's happening, I need to know about it so I can protect myself, or how much of it's just like, you know, oh, thank God I'm here and not there. Or, you know, I don't know where all that comes from. But I can tell you, one of the questions that you had asked sort of before we started this was about the criminalization of homelessness.
Okay, yeah,
And I wanted to, one of the things that needs to be very clear is in New Mexico, there's not a law against being homeless.
Okay.
It is not illegal to not own a home or not have, you know, an address. What's illegal are some of the crimes that are often committed by people who don't have homes. One of them is criminal trespassing.
Okay, yeah.
Now, that's a crime because you're violating someone else's property.
Yeah.
It's punishable by up to a year in jail. But I can tell you, particularly in the metro, that if someone is arrested on criminal trespass, they will be out the next day with credit time served.
Okay.
They will not be doing a year in jail. It's, in fact, almost anything you get arrested for as a homeless person, you'll be out the next day with credit time served for criminal trespassing, as it turns out. Just because of the volume of cases, they have to do something with them.
Okay.
So people who have a syringe or a couple pills or, you know, a low level of
the
possession,
fentanyl or
anything, you know, they may be out with criminal trespass too. If they have a higher level, that's going to be a different deal. But low level shopliftings often get resolved that same way, and it's partly because of the volume, but it's also partly because we all recognize the state, defense, everybody recognizes, you look at some of these situations and you know, this person is desperate. This person has fallen down on their luck for whatever reason, and maybe it's drug addiction, maybe it's mental illness. Usually it's both.
It's a combination, right?
Almost always. It's almost always a combination, and the mentally ill are more likely to self-medicate to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
And they often don't like the prescriptions that doctors give them because they don't feel good. They make them feel down. They take away the mania.
Well, they take away
they
take away the dopamine, so they don't really feel anything.
Right, and
they get tired of not having any emotions or pleasure because that kind of medication numbs that. Right? It dulls that. So yeah, it's like that vicious cycle, you know?
Yeah, and so then you get addicted to drugs. But the problem is we also have drug-induced psychoses. Why are we oh, I'm sorry, but like why are we seeing that now? Like I remember, like, you know, when you used to go into certain neighborhoods, certain areas here in Albuquerque, like you'd see people that were obviously under the influence of something, whether it be a substance, whether it be a narcotic, illicit street drug, whatever. But now, like, you see this breakdown where you see people are either so inebriated and stoned on fentanyl where, like, they can't even move, or you see people, like, talking to trees, talking to themselves, yelling at street signs.
Yeah, and like, and it used to not be that way, but like now. And I've known some people who, because of working in behavioral health for a year, that like I've seen people start out and they started out somewhat normal, but after a year's time, like they were walking around talking to themselves. They had all these weird behaviors and mannerisms, and like I don't remember it being that way like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Right.
But it is now.
And there's a lot of that, but it's also creating a really dangerous situation for police.
Yeah.
Because you have people who are using a lot of drugs, they're high on the drugs. The drugs are genuinely affecting their cognitive abilities to the point where we often have people come into custody, they're not competent coming into custody, and they attain competency because they're sober. Just being in custody for a couple weeks, not having access to the drugs, their brain clears up, and now they understand the proceedings. They understand what they're being charged with. They understand what's happening. And we have police walking into situations with people who have used a lot of drugs, are using a lot of drugs, are in these kind of psychotic modes within their heads, and they're incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And you know, I had a guy, I think a month or two ago, he ended up burning down his mom's garage and shooting and a bunch of other stuff, trying to avoid being arrested on warrant.
Yeah.
And he was just completely out of his mind. And he was in court the next day screaming at the judge, cussing at the judge, you know, trying to flip the table, just out of his mind.
Yeah.
And a month later, we had him back in court, and he sat there and we could talk to him. He understood what was happening.
Yeah, he needed that time
But when police went in, he was ready to kill people.
Yeah, and you know, without the grace of God, he probably would have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we have here. It says that I have here in these notes that I've kind of fashioned. It says we cannot arrest our way out of the homeless crisis. True. Right, and here's some just general information about criminalization of the homeless. Criminalization of the homeless is when law enforcement threatens to punish homeless people for doing things in public that every person has to do. These activities include sleeping, resting, sheltering oneself, asking for donations, or simply existing in public places. It also includes arbitrarily or unfairly enforcing other laws such as jaywalking, disorderly conduct. They're doing the sweeps, displacing homeless individuals from outdoor public spaces through harassments, threats, evictions from these so-called living camps. So is criminalization of the homeless just simply a case of someone that has a hardened heart? I know the answer to that is no, because I know it's very intricate and it's very complicated. But why are so many people? See, what I've seen in my short time of looking at this and studying and observing things in the international district is that there seems to be a polarization. There seems to be two groups of people, and it's almost like they're fighting a war against each other. It's like they want them out, they want them gone, and then there's another group that wants to almost enable or just kind of love people to death. And so let's start with the criminalization of the homeless. I mean, why can that be so dangerous?
Well,
for the people and for the society.
It's hard in a lot of ways because, and looking nationwide, yes, I see camp sweeps and this kind of thing. Here in New Mexico, here in Albuquerque, we don't have enough officers and they don't have enough time to be doing most of that kind of stuff. Most of what homeless people are getting arrested for is not being homeless or the act of being homeless or even defecating in public or having sex in public.
Yeah, you said it ties to the drugs.
It's usually because they are shot up and passed out.
Yeah.
And maybe they've passed out in a roadway. They might get picked up by the police.
Yeah.
Or they're in the middle of a walkway, they're blocking traffic. They may be arrested for, like I said, criminal trespassing because they've decided to help themselves to someone else's property.
Yeah.
They decide, I'm going to stay in your backyard or I'm going to stay in your house. You were out of town for a week and now you can't evict me.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Things like that. But a lot of what you see homeless arrests for, like the disorderly conduct and the battery, the disorderly conduct is usually coming from the drugs. Because to a very large extent, until you're disturbing people, the police don't care.
Well, they can't really do anything either.
Right.
Yeah.
When they start getting lots of complaints, or you have somebody in the middle of the street, who stopped traffic and is cussing at the cars and punching their windshields, the police need to get involved in that situation. That's a dangerous situation.
Sure.
If not for the homeless person standing in traffic, for everybody else.
Yeah.
You see batteries and thefts between homeless people.
We've seen that. We've seen that where we live, right where I live. Me and my wife and my two little boys. We live over by the Gateway, and there's been two murders, two homicides where it's like the unhoused are killing each other over the drugs. There was a stabbing, there was a shooting, and so this is this is good. So this is a question. This is another question I have too, because remember that we're talking about and remember that Ellen is an assistant district attorney, so she's giving you like wonderful information that you're not really going to get anywhere else. So this is very important. But I wanted to ask you this. People who live in the areas like where me and my wife live, people who live in the international district, people who live in these areas, to be honest with you, like they get tired of seeing like human feces on the sidewalk. They get tired of coming out every morning and seeing trash thrown all over their streets. They get tired of the aggressive and the relentless begging and panhandling and the illicit crimes and the auto thefts and all that goes with that. So like, I'm not defending people who are on the other side that just want to, it seems to just eradicate and just eliminate the homeless altogether, because I think that deep down, I think that the hearts of people are very black and evil because they don't see people as people. They see homeless or unhoused people
they see them as a threat,
as a disease, a scourge.
I really think to a very large extent, people see them as a threat.
Yeah.
This is someone that might be dangerous to me. They're unpredictable in their behavior. They want my money and I don't know what they're going to do.
And sometimes that's the truth, right?
Yes.
Because like
But that's that, and the trash and the drugs and the crime, whatever. I understand people don't want homeless people camping in their front yard. I totally understand that. And I also understand that we can't just say, no, it's okay. You guys just go where you want, do what you want to do. It's a free society. Because people do deserve the right to public enjoyment of their own space.
Yeah.
And of public
Well,
spaces, ideally.
you know, and to be fair, like I have, you know, you and your husband and other people that I know that I've been friends with for years, like they've gotten out of certain areas of the Albuquerque metro area because they're tired of the feces, they're tired of the camps, they're tired of all of that. So they've just said, you know what, we're just going to get away from it. We're going to kind of get as far away as we can from it because we want our peace, we want our solitude. I want to come home from working hard and providing for my family and for my marriage or whatever. I want to come home and I don't want to have to see garbage thrown all over the thing. You know, I don't want to have to step over. I don't want to go to the dumpster and see 5 people that are smoking fentanyl. I want to be able to walk my dog around the block and with my 2 little kids and not have to worry about my kids getting caught in the crossfire because there's 10 people posted up on one corner who are smoking fentanyl
or stepping on a needle or picking up a little chunk of fentanyl and thinking it's a candy and popping it in their mouth.
Yeah, or your dog eats it and then your dog dies. Yeah. Right. And like, you know, these are things like these are real things that are like really going on and like they're really happening. So, you know, what do we as the church, what do we as evangelicals, like what do we say and do, not only for the unhoused, but for those who are frustrated in these communities because like, you know, we always have to take into consideration the unhoused because they are poor, they are the marginalized, they are the forgotten people. But then you have the other side of the proverbial coin as well. Where what about Joe Sixpack or you know the blue collar workers that because not everybody that lives in the because one thing we do here is we try to break down stigmas and we try to break down stereotypes, and not everybody that lives in the international district like they're not on drugs like. There are people that are just trying to make it, and like if they could afford it, they would move out too. But like they can't. So like, what do we do for the unhoused, and what do we do for the people who are frustrated in these communities? Because people in these communities, like they're tired of this stuff, but like there doesn't seem to be a remedy, and that's why I opened with that text when Jesus says, "The poor you will have with you always." And that's true. Like we're never going to create utopia. It's, you know, and the problem with homelessness and unhoused, you know, this goes all the way back. This is a problem that is nothing new. You know, I know a lot of people think it's new, but this is since the beginning of time, like however you see that.
This is why people have sold themselves into slavery.
Yeah.
Since prehistory.
Yeah.
It's because they couldn't pay their bills. They couldn't keep a house over their head. Maybe they sold a child. Maybe they sold themselves. Maybe they bonded themselves to a master for a certain period of years. But no, you look at the International District, and we have families there that have been there for literally generations.
Yes.
This is their family home, and the city just went to hell around them, and now they can't get out. We have young people who are starting families. We have young working people. We have all ages of people who are struggling.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been through a divorce. Maybe they lost a job. You know, something that happens to people.
Yeah, because your income, right? Like you have to make. Yeah,
but you have to make a certain amount of money to afford a certain place.
To sign the lease.
And if you know, if the only place you can afford is down there, well, it's better than living in your car, right?
Yeah, maybe? Yeah. And see, like there's a lot of people like me and my family. Like there's times where like we want out, but I feel like God has. God has called me and my family. God has put a burden on our hearts to do our best. And as an evangelist, as a person who really wants to engage in missionary work, whether it be, you know, this is more urban mission, but through my studies, I know that if you're going to be a missionary in an urban area, then like you have to live in that area.
Yeah,
like
you have to
can't
actually be there.
Yeah, you can't like you can't drive to Edgewood at the end of the day, if you're going to reach people in the international district, then you have to live in the
You have
international
to actually
district.
be available to people.
You have to know the different dynamics. You have to know the streets. You have to know where the problems are. You have to be familiar with the people. You have to be familiar with how everything intersects. Like, you can't get in your car at the end of the day
and go home
and drive away to a safe place, because mission work just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So these are extremely difficult. And you know what?
Well, let me tell you two more things.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Two more things. Can we solve homelessness? Well, not tonight. This is a very, very big, complex problem.
Yeah.
And you know that. You know. And there are so many intricacies, and there are really valid points for every approach.
Yeah, okay.
But one thing that I think could be done that would make a dramatic difference in both the number of homeless and in the quality of their lives would be if we closed the border.
Okay.
The fentanyl that is literally flooding into this country, and like I told you earlier, everybody who gets arrested has fentanyl on them, it seems.
Okay.
It's everywhere. And
I really believe that.
It scares me to death. It is so powerful, and people are dying. People are overdosing,
and it
intentionally,
seems like,
unintentionally. People are dying. And the more money you spend on drugs, and the more powerful the drugs are, and the more addicted to the drugs you are, you spend more money. You start stealing to support it. You're taking from your family. Okay, now you're taking from people who aren't your family. You're taking from friends. You're taking from strangers. Okay, maybe you're just going to do a smash and grab. Maybe you're going to start, selling Legos to whoever it is.
Oh yeah, the Lego. Those. Yeah, I saw that. The Lego thief.
Oh no, there's so many people stealing Legos right now.
Yeah.
There's like a whole syndicate. Anyway, but you look at all of that, and we're not going to solve it tonight.
No.
But if you cut off the poison we're injecting into the problem, I think it would make a real difference.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I wanted to say is, so if I take off my proverbial attorney hat and put on my Christian hat, is that we are supposed to be loving these people.
Sure.
That is so clear from Jesus's words.
Yeah.
There is no question that we are not supposed to be stepping over and ignoring people in pain. Stop. But does that mean you let them into your house and they let them, hurt your family or steal from you? Or, does that mean that you spend all your time bringing food? And it's hard to say. It's really hard to say.
Yeah.
How do we as Christians approach this? But one of the things I think we have to do is look at causes, not just treating symptoms.
Okay.
Look at resources to address mental health.
Yeah.
Look at resources to address getting people transitioned out of homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who are homeless, a few of them want to be there, but most of them don't.
Yeah, and we always want to, we always want to keep that into perspective, because I think a lot of times that like we forget that. Forget, like we really forget, like people are dying like every day because of fentanyl. People are being trafficked, and there's all kinds of awful things that are happening because of these situations that surround poverty, surround homelessness, surround drug addiction. And so I wanted to bring this up too, with the two polarizations. You have one side that just wants to get rid of the problems, just get rid of the people, whatever it takes, get them out, scrape them up, clean them off, right? Whatever.
Make the city safe again.
And then you have another side who is very kind of docile, very kind of passive, because remember, like, we don't know the hearts, and like they're all for being lenient and being tolerant with the trash and the feces and the drugs and all the problems. Yes. But you know what I've seen too at times is that, you see, people tend to see the issue differently when the unhoused show up on their sidewalk, right, in their community, in their public Park. You know, I work with a wonderful man off and on, and he lives in the Old Town district, and you know, he's a very liberal person. He's a very he's a very nice person. He comes from California, so he's very well versed in what California's tried and what didn't work, and in Oakland and the homeless situation, and like you know, and he's all, you know, of course he's against criminalization of the homeless, but you know, in Old Town, you know the news and how they've had problems trying to keep the unhoused out of Old Town because it's a tourist place, and it brings in revenue and people, and so, but
it's
like,
all about the money.
and so we don't have any problem with that. But then when you open your door at 6:30 in the morning and you look outside and you've got 4 people who are squatting in your driveway or on your sidewalk and they refuse to move, then it becomes a completely different, then it becomes complicated, then it becomes difficult, then it becomes kind of like, that's kind of like where the rubber meets the road. And I'll tell you that there are very few, most of our politicians have hardly ever seen the camps. They've hardly ever walked down. I think that Grisham did, you know, Grisham went down, she went downtown and saw, you know, a couple of tents with her nice, you know, $400 velvet shoes and or whatever. And but that's good for her. I mean, at least she did something. But most of the politicians, they haven't seen the camps. They haven't seen the open air drug markets. They haven't seen the prostitution. They haven't seen the madness. They haven't seen the suffering. And most of the pastors here in the city of Albuquerque, like, they haven't seen it either. And until you go out and walk amongst what's going on, until you're like Moses and you leave the palace, you leave Pharaoh's house and you go down to the proverbial brickyards and you go down to where the suffering is, and you leave the shoreline and you launch out into the deep, I think it's then, and it's only then, that you're really going to understand like what's happening.
No, I agree. You can drive by it, but that doesn't make you understand it. You can watch it on the news, but you're not going to understand it.
Yeah.
And I think, well, yeah, I think a lot of things about that. But actually having, you know, I guess I was homeless for a very short period of time. When I was in college, I had bought a house, and then it burned down. And so my roommate and I and her 2 little kids were living in a tent in the front yard, and we lived there for a couple months, and then it got cold, and I had picked up a job as a waitress because I was a student at the time, didn't have any income, and you know, and we figured it out, and we ended up in a little RV for a little while, and then we were finally able to get back into a real structure. But when my husband went homeless, he was homeless for months and months and months and months and months. It was like 2.5 years or something. All told, before he officially had an address again. And part of what I see in hearing about his experiences and in my own experiences is completely limited and, you know, not the same as it is. But part of what I see is that so much of the problem with homelessness is that we are throwing money at solving homelessness, but somehow there's enough money to be made there that homelessness actually isn't getting addressed. We have all kinds of great programs and people with good hearts who are trying to do good things and might address, you know, this square block and give them water every day. But that's not addressing the underlying issue. We're treating symptoms. We're throwing a ton of money at it, and people are still suffering.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The people who are living on the streets, as scary as they are, as sometimes malevolent as they are suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, you don't want to take them in your car because they'll stab you and take your money, but they are also suffering, and they are also people. They are souls.
Yeah, from the Christian perspective, yeah.
And you know, Jesus didn't tell us to, you know, smite your brother because he pissed you off or something like this.
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to love even our enemies. That doesn't mean I bring them into my home, but it does mean I've got to look at this problem from a bigger perspective and say, okay, what are the causes?
Yeah.
You know, what got us here? a big piece of what got us here was the change in how we handled mental health.
Yeah.
And this was back in the 90s.
Yeah, the mental health crisis. Yeah.
When we went through this mental health crisis, they closed all the mental health hospitals because people were being badly treated. It's a huge mess. But then
Yeah.
we didn't have another option. And a lot of the people who are really truly chronic homeless, not couch surfing.
Yeah, because there's all the different levels.
Right,
We
right.
talked about those.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, not well, I'm staying with friends, I don't really have my own place yet, but you're okay, you're still being fed. You're still sleeping on a couch most of the time.
Yeah.
You're not actually sleeping on pavement.
Yeah.
But when you look at the people who are really, homeless at that level, they've burned every bridge. Their family, if they care, doesn't know where they are. They are living on the street, sleeping at the bus stop, kind of homeless.
Yeah.
They're almost always schizophrenic.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
They are almost always seriously mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
And so is leaving them out there, is that the most humane option? Is that better than locking them up in the hospital? I don't know. I don't have that answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's a question that needs to be seriously considered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think we need an option for long-term care for people who are really, really sick, because they're on the streets and they're suffering. The women are being raped regularly.
Yeah, that's an awful
I hear about
reality.
it all the time. Men are being beaten, they're being stabbed, they're being raped as well. It is suffering. It is not fun. It is not a vacation. It is not like camping.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, I'm not going to film anything anymore going on down there, because I think it's wrong. Yeah. And I think it's sad. And a lot of and some of the other stuff that I've looked at here in the city of Albuquerque, particularly videos in Phoenix and all these other different states, it's these guys who are filming these skinny little chicks that are engaging in prostitution, and the conversation always leads to that. And it's how are you helping people like this? Why are you why aren't you filming other people? Why don't you film a guy because that is what people want to see. That is what, and that's sick, and that's twisted, and it's terrible.
Or whatever,
but that's why I think that we have to be careful when we're, whatever reason. And I've even seen ministries that were going down to the International District. You remember the debacle that they had on Pennsylvania and Central with Adan Food Market?
No.
The Adan Food Market, there's a little store down there, and they cater to, it's a food desert down there because, that Walmart went belly up and everything. But it was a hot spot. The news was there. There was killings there. There was overdoses there. People were getting mugged down there. And there were churches that were going down there. And to their credit, they were handing out water. They were trying to do the corporal works of mercy. But there was a lot of people that I felt they thought it was cool. It's going to the zoo. It's going down.
Going to the zoo.
Yeah, going to see the animals at the zoo. Or
Exactly.
let's take our church down here.
Let's go to the war zone. Check it out.
Yeah, let's take our church down here in the slums. That way we can put it on Facebook, we can film it, and we can show everybody how the wonderful things that we're doing for the community in the name of Christ. But you know what? As soon as APD began to clean up that particular area, people didn't want to go down there anymore because there wasn't any animals to see. There wasn't any fun.
It
wasn't seedy
anymore,
enough.
right.
It wasn't dirty enough. It wasn't rotten and filthy enough. And I thought that was sad. And I personally witnessed that. It's so now they're cleaning things up, and what are you going to look for now? A more violent place for you to go to put your church up there on social media. It's if you're going to do something like that in the name of Jesus, for the sake of Christ, for the sake of the body of Christ, then don't film it.
Right.
Because people, it's tacky, it's distasteful, it's not something that you need to play with. Like you said, people are getting killed, women are being raped, people are being exploited, and these things are happening they're happening right now. And I like what you said. You said, we're not going to solve it overnight. We're not going to solve it tonight. But but we've also have to realize that we have to begin to have these conversations, and we have to fix the gulf that has been formed with these two different polarizations, because there's a lot of people who live in Albuquerque, and like I think this way at times, it almost seems like they have the attitude like the old song, the Pink Floyd song that says, there's one smoking a joint, there's another with spots. If I had my way, I'd have all of you shot. But like you think about that, but like there's people that are out there, and it seems like that's what they want.
Yeah,
and sadly, I think there are Christians out there, and it seems that like that's what they want too. And the problem is when you cannot admit that, and you cannot admit that darkness resides in you, because that's a work of the flesh. You could be saved for 30 years. The Holy Spirit could be living in you. But if you think that doesn't rise up in you, and if you think that doesn't come up in you, then like you're sadly deceived, and you're on your, you're not peering into the abyss anymore, because Nietzsche said when you peer into the abyss peers back into you. So I think that we've got to come to that realization where like, no, I love Jesus, and I live in the metro area, but like my heart's not right. Like there's darkness in me. I need to take those things before the Lord. I need to try to get more involved in what I can do to be a solution of the problem, because if you think about criminalization of the homeless, you're bordering on fascist thinking. You're bordering on totalitarian thinking. And that isn't good. That can be dangerous. Now, I don't think it's gone to that far of an extreme, but I think you're getting in those shallow waters.
And I think you may be giving it too much credit. I don't think when people are criminalizing things that are tend to be homeless acts, that they are looking at any kind of societal control. What I think they're doing is somebody's in their ear saying, we have this problem, you have to do something, you have to do something. And they react. And they make a law. They make some legislation. Yeah. One of the classic examples of that is, if you remember the little boy that came over from Cuba, and he was in Florida. Wet foot, dry foot. Elon. Yeah. Or Elian. Yeah. There was legislation, national legislation regarding immigration made based on that case, as a reaction to that case. And it doesn't fit in with any of the other immigration law. And the immigration law itself is just this huge, fragmented, messy thing. It's incredible. It's so bad. I can't explain it. I did a full semester on immigration law, and I still can't explain it. It is such a mess. But part of that is because it's reactionary. Yeah. And so if you have someone in your ear saying, hey, we've got this problem down on 4th Street. We need a stoplight on 4th Street. We need it right now. You go, fine. We get a stoplight on 4th Street, without looking at the traffic patterns, without looking at how that's going to interact with the neighborhoods. Yeah, like a knee-jerk reaction. Right. Yeah. You're responding to a problem instead of looking at the big problem as a whole. And how do we actually dig this out by the roots, instead of just clipping the top and trying to make it look nice. Yeah. I want to end real quick on this. I want to end real quick on safe spaces. Okay. You remember Coronado Park? Yes. Right? Coronado Park was, 6-7 years where it was allowed to, people could go in and people could camp, and like should there be another Coronado Park? Should there be another big lot where people can come in, and will that work? Can it work? See, I don't know, because one of the things they've done in attempting to address homelessness is these small house communities. Yeah, the tiny home. Yeah. But they made it so hard to get into the tiny home. You had to have 30 days of sobriety. But I think to my credit, I think that they've rolled that back. I don't think it's as hard to get in as it used to be. But so how will Coronado Park work again? Can they have another area?
another big area, because I hear people say this all the time. Look at that space over there. They've got all that space over there. Why don't they just let people tent out? Why don't they just let people run amok over there? Like, will that work? Will it work for the community? Will it work for the neighborhoods?
See, I think there's a lot of people you have to ask that question to. I think you have to ask the police that question. Because they're the ones that are going to have to risk their lives to go in there every day.
Yeah.
I think you have to ask the people who live in that neighborhood and whoever owns whatever that property is that question.
Because a lot of people, like, they don't realize this. Like, I talked to a friend of mine, and I've known a couple people who tried to live in Coronado Park. There's a hierarchy in those.
Yes.
There are people that come out and they say, okay, you want to live in the park, you give me half of what you have.
Exactly.
And if you don't give me half of what you have, then you're going to be out. And if you don't have any money, then okay, that girl there, she looks pretty nice, so we're going to make an arrangement. And so people think, uneducated people, ignorant people, they may mean well, but they don't realize that you're swimming with sharks. They don't realize that there's no honor among thieves there in the Coronado Park. So they think it's just like this big utopia, candy land, and that isn't the case at all.
No, it's law of the jungle. It's just like the law of jungle in prison. And
okay, great. Yes.
Anytime you bring a group of people together and sort of force certain conditions,
there's a hierarchy.
A hierarchy will naturally develop, just like in my chicken coop.
Sure.
You take the rooster out, and when the chicken starts beating up on everybody, you put the rooster back in, everybody's cool.
Okay, great. It's a great analogy. Yeah.
But if we look at like these homeless parks, and we say, okay, this is going to be a place that's going to be dangerous. People are going to get hurt. Drugs are going to be used. People are going to be bought and sold. Do we want that? Well, no, not really. Okay. But now we also have to turn around and say, look at all of these people who are suffering.
Yeah.
Who are mentally ill, who are addicted to drugs, who need help, or they are going to die.
Yeah. And one of the good things about
what do we do
about having the fish all in one pot is, as awful and hellish as that is at least there can be an effort to bring in the resources. There can be an effort to connect with people, because these problems are so delicate, they're so intricate, they're so complicated. But as we close, one thing we have to do is we have to begin to have the conversations about what is going on.
See, I completely agree. And a big part of it is because we see, a little blip of what's happening in San Francisco, but no, that's happening 3 blocks over.
Yeah, and if you talk to people,
here.
and if you talk to people who are from California, they'll or if they're from California, if they're from Washington, if they're from Oregon, and they hear you complaining about homelessness, like, they just laugh at you. They're like, what are you talking about? You don't even have any idea. But for the people who have lived here and grown up here and seen the city decay and seen the city just kind of crumble,
the transition's remarkable.
Yeah, so it's all about perspective. But Ellen, I want to thank you tonight. I want to thank you and your husband, you and your husband Corey, for your hospitality. And the best thing that we can do is begin to pray, to begin to ask God to send His Holy Spirit into those places where the darkness is, to the light of the gospel, the light of transformation, and we can come together and we can pray for these neighborhoods, we can pray for the community, we can pray for the city, because Jesus says, He says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot put it out. So, Ellen, thank you for your time, and we hope that you will watch again. God bless you.